Jessica Fletcher and the Mysterious Painting. Chapter 1. The Arrival at Hawthorne House. Jessica Fletcher had always been drawn to the unexpected, and Hawthorne House was certainly no exception. It was perched atop a hill just outside the tranquil village of St. Mary Mead, the kind of place that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. The mansion, an aging Victorian structure, was surrounded by sprawling grounds, overgrown with ivy and wildflowers, giving the house an air of mystery that felt timeless. Today, however, Jessica was invited to an art exhibition by an old acquaintance, Dr. Gregory Hawthorne, a renowned art historian and collector. As Jessica pulled up in her car, she couldn't help but feel a sense of intrigue. Dr. Hawthorne had sent her an invitation, asking her to witness an event that was to showcase some rare and valuable paintings, including works believed to have been lost to history. She was, as always, intrigued by the world of art, and Dr. Hawthorne's invitation had come at the perfect time. The front door opened before Jessica could even reach it, and Edith Hawthorne, Gregory's daughter, greeted her with a nervous smile. Edith was young and bright-eyed, but carried the weight of the family name, which had a long and prestigious history in the art world. Her father, Gregory, had been a driving force in preserving historical art and was known for his expansive collection. "Jessica, thank you for coming," Edith said, ushering her into the grand foyer. The house smelled of old wood and fresh paint, the mix of preservation and modernization evident in the surroundings. "It's my pleasure, Edith. I've been hearing about your father's collection for years," Jessica replied, taking in the grandeur of the hall. The walls were lined with large, intricate paintings, each one more stunning than the last. It was clear that this was a place where history was not only preserved but celebrated. The exhibition had already begun, and guests were milling about, discussing the works on display. Many of them were familiar faces, art collectors, critics, and dealers from across the country. But there was one painting that immediately caught Jessica's attention. At the far end of the room, behind a velvet rope, was a large portrait that seemed out of place. It wasn't a traditional work of beauty, like many of the other pieces in the room. Instead, it depicted a woman with striking eyes, her face partially obscured by shadow. Jessica couldn't quite explain it, but there was something unnerving about the painting. The woman's eyes seemed alive, following her every move. I see you found the portrait," Edith said, noticing Jessica's gaze. "It's one of my father's prized pieces, a discovery from his last trip to France. The artist remains unknown, but the figure is believed to be a noble woman who vanished mysteriously nearly a century ago." Jessica studied the portrait more closely. The woman's eyes, so lifelike, made her skin crawl slightly. There was an intensity to the gaze that made the painting feel far more than just a piece of art. Something about it seemed alive, as if it were hiding a story that no one had yet discovered. "It's captivating," Jessica replied, her voice trailing off. "But it feels almost unsettling." Edith nodded, a shadow passing over her face. "My father is obsessed with it. He believes it holds a deeper secret, one that could change the way we understand art history. But sometimes I wonder if he's not digging into something he should leave buried." Before Jessica could ask any further questions, a scream shattered the air, cutting through the murmur of conversation. Guests froze in place, and Edith's face drained of color. Without a word, she grabbed Jessica's arm and rushed toward the source of the scream. The gallery room had descended into chaos. People were shouting, others running, but Jessica's mind immediately focused on the figure lying in the middle of the room. Dr. Gregory Hawthorne, her old friend and the host of the evening, was sprawled on the floor, lifeless. His face was pale, his body unnaturally still. A pool of blood had already begun to form around him. Edith collapsed to her knees beside her father, tears streaming down her face. No, it can't be. He was just fine. Jessica knelt down beside the body, her instincts kicking into overdrive. There were no immediate signs of natural causes. Dr. Hawthorne's face was locked in a final expression of shock, and his hands were splayed wide as if reaching for something in the air. A glance at his neck revealed a faint mark, a line almost imperceptible to the eye. It was not the work of a weapon, but something much subtler, like a grip or a pressure point. The room went quiet as the police arrived, led by Detective Inspector Wallace. He was a tall man, with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately commanded respect. His eyes swept the room, noting every detail. Jessica stood up and approached him, offering her condolences to Edith as the inspector began his examination of the scene. "Miss Fletcher," the inspector said, acknowledging her presence with a nod. "I'm afraid this is no accident. A crime has been committed here." "Indeed," Jessica replied, her mind racing. "And I believe it is no ordinary crime. The painting, it may hold the key to what has happened." Inspector Wallace raised an eyebrow. "A painting, you say? How could a painting be involved in a murder?" Jessica paused, staring back at the portrait that seemed to stare right through her. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." The evening took on an entirely new energy as the guests were questioned, and the once celebratory air of the gathering had vanished entirely. In its place was a dense tension, with everyone left to wonder, who among them had committed the murder of Dr. Gregory Hawthorne, and what did the painting have to do with it? As Jessica prepared for the investigation ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that the key to solving this murder was hidden within the very thing that had first caught her eye, the mysterious portrait that now hung in the center of the storm. Chapter 2: The Unraveling Mystery. The evening passed in a blur of tension, and Jessica could feel her instincts pulling her deeper into the mystery of Dr. Gregory Hawthorne's death. The guests had been scattered into groups, each clutching glasses of wine, murmuring in low tones as they waited for more information. The air was thick with uncertainty, and the faint echo of nervous laughter only amplified the dread that hung over Hawthorne House. Jessica sat in a quiet corner of the study, sipping on the glass of red wine that Edith had handed her, though she barely tasted it. Her mind was racing, each thought racing toward a singular point: the mysterious portrait and its possible connection to the murder. She had witnessed many deaths in her time as an amateur sleuth, but something about this case felt different. There was an aura surrounding the painting, an unnatural energy that seemed to pulse from it, like an unwelcome presence lingering in the room. Detective Inspector Wallace approached her, his brow furrowed in concentration as he set down his notebook. "Miss Fletcher," he said, his tone respectful but tinged with urgency. "I'm afraid I'll need your assistance with this one. There's no clear sign of what happened to Dr. Hawthorne. His body was found beside the painting, but no one saw or heard anything. No weapon, no struggle, nothing." Jessica nodded. "I've noticed that too. There's something off about this whole scene." "You say no one heard anything?" "No. Wallace replied. Everyone was focused on the paintings, including the one you mentioned. A few of the guests say they were near the gallery at the time, but no one saw anything unusual. I'm sure they didn't, Jessica murmured. But that doesn't mean nothing was unusual. The key to understanding what happened is in that room. Or rather, in the painting. The inspector raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical but willing to hear her out. What do you mean? It's just a painting, isn't it? Not just a painting, Jessica replied. It's a clue. Something more than an image on a canvas. I can feel it. Wallace sighed, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, an acknowledgement of Jessica's sharp intuition. What should we do next? Jessica rose to her feet. I'd like to see the painting again. Alone. Wallace hesitated, but then nodded. Very well, but I'll have someone with you. For your safety. No need, Jessica said, shaking her head. I'm quite capable of handling myself. Just keep everyone away from the gallery until I'm done. The inspector reluctantly agreed, and within moments, the room fell quiet as he issued instructions to his officers. Jessica walked back into the gallery, her steps deliberate as she approached the portrait. She couldn't explain why, but she felt as though she was being drawn to it, as if something unseen was pulling her in. As she stood before it again, she examined the painting more closely, her mind working quickly. The woman's eyes, once unsettling, now seemed almost desperate, as though they were trying to communicate something, perhaps a warning. Jessica's gaze swept across the rest of the painting. The figure was clad in a dark, flowing gown, standing tall in an atmosphere of shadow and light. There was something almost ethereal about her presence, like a memory that refused to fade. Who are you? Jessica whispered under her breath. And what are you trying to tell me? Her eyes narrowed when she noticed something she hadn't seen before, an inscription along the bottom edge of the frame, barely noticeable. She crouched down to get a better look. The letters were faded, worn by time, but they were still legible enough to read. The truth lies within the shadows. A chill ran through Jessica's spine. It was a cryptic message, but the meaning seemed clear. The woman in the portrait was not merely a figure from history. She was a symbol of something hidden, something buried beneath the surface of the mystery surrounding Dr. Hawthorne's death. The shadows in the painting were more than just an artistic choice. They were part of the story. Jessica straightened, taking a deep breath. She was certain now that the painting held the answer, and that Dr. Hawthorne had stumbled upon it just before his death. But what had he discovered? And why had it cost him his life? Miss Fletcher. Jessica turned to find Edith standing in the doorway, her face pale and filled with worry. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands shook slightly as she gripped the frame of the door. Edith, what is it? Jessica asked softly. I found something, Edith said, her voice trembling. Something in my father's study. I think it might help. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. What did you find? Edith stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. It's a letter. A letter my father wrote to someone named Lucien. He mentioned the painting. I think it's about the woman in the portrait. Jessica's mind raced. Where is it? Edith hesitated for a moment, glancing at the painting. It's hidden in a drawer in my father's desk. I don't know what it means, but I think it has something to do with the secret he was keeping. Let's go, Jessica said. We need to see it. In Dr. Hawthorne's study, the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of the mystery that had taken over the house. Edith led Jessica to a large mahogany desk, its drawers lined with files and papers, some neatly organized, others in disarray. Edith opened the top drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope, its seal broken. She handed it to Jessica, her fingers trembling. Jessica carefully opened the letter, her eyes scanning the neat, precise handwriting. Dearest Lucien, I have found it, the painting. It is just as you said, and I believe it holds the key to everything. The woman's identity, her connection to the lost paintings. I fear what this discovery may mean, and I am beginning to wonder if we have made a terrible mistake. The shadows are closing in on me, and I do not know how much longer I can continue this research. But I must. There is too much at stake. We will meet soon, and I will explain everything. I trust you understand the danger. Yours always, Gregory. Jessica lowered the letter, her thoughts swirling. It's as I suspected. Dr. Hawthorne wasn't merely researching art. He had uncovered something dangerous, and it cost him his life. Edith looked up, her face filled with confusion. But what does it mean? What did he discover? Jessica folded the letter and looked at the portrait again, the figure in the painting seemingly watching them both. It means that this painting isn't just a work of art. It's a map to something lost, and something worth killing for. Chapter 3. A Web of Lies. Jessica spent the night contemplating the letter she had read in Dr. Hawthorne's study. The words haunted her as she lay in bed, each sentence unraveling a deeper layer of mystery that had yet to be fully uncovered. The woman in the portrait, the cryptic message about shadows, and Dr. Hawthorne's secretive research, all of it pointed to something far darker than a simple art discovery. But what exactly had Dr. Hawthorne uncovered? And why had it led to his death? The next morning, Jessica was back in the study, determined to follow up on her suspicions. Edith, who had been inconsolable after the loss of her father, was still in the drawing room, wrapped in a blanket of grief. Jessica could sense the young woman's pain, but she couldn't afford to get distracted. The truth was out there, and Jessica was determined to find it. She went through the piles of documents in the study once more, hoping to find more clues to the mystery. It was then that her eyes fell upon a small leather-bound journal tucked beneath a stack of old art catalogs. The cover was weathered, the edges frayed from years of use. It was clear that this was something important to Dr. Hawthorne. As Jessica opened the journal, she discovered a series of notes, some written in a hurried scrawl, others meticulously transcribed. Most notably, they contained references to Lucien, the person mentioned in the letter. As Jessica skimmed through the pages, it became clear that Lucien was no mere acquaintance. He was a shadowy figure from Dr. Hawthorne's past, someone who seemed to have an intense interest in the more obscure and illicit corners of the art world. The journal mentioned a collection of stolen paintings, some of which had been lost to history, and others that had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The entries grew more disturbing as Jessica continued to read. Dr. Hawthorne had mentioned that Lucian had insisted on locating a particular painting, a portrait of a woman, one that was rumored to have belonged to a notorious art dealer who had disappeared decades ago. This was the same woman depicted in the painting in the gallery. Jessica felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It was clear now that Dr. Hawthorne's research into the painting was more than academic. It was a dangerous game. But what was Lucian's role in all of this? And why had Dr. Hawthorne kept him a secret? The more Jessica read, the more questions emerged. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture was still incomplete. Miss Fletcher. Jessica turned at the sound of Edith's voice. The young woman stood in the doorway, her face pale, but with a new resolve in her eyes. She had clearly pulled herself together since the previous night. "I've been thinking about what you said," Edith said, her voice shaking slightly. "About my father's research. I'm afraid there's more I need to tell you." Jessica stood up and gestured for Edith to sit. "I'm listening." Edith hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't know the whole story, but I think my father was getting too close to something dangerous. You see, Lucian wasn't just a colleague or a friend. He was involved in things that weren't exactly legal. My father had been investigating some of the people Lucian had worked with over the years. Art forgers, thieves, even smugglers." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "So, your father wasn't just studying art history?" "No," Edith replied. "He was uncovering a network. An underground network of people who used art as a cover for their criminal activities. And I think he was getting close to exposing them." Jessica thought for a moment. "What about the painting? The one in the gallery? Did your father ever talk about it?" Edith's face darkened. "He was obsessed with it. It wasn't just the woman in the painting. He believed that the artist had been involved in some of the crimes. But the painting itself, it was linked to a man named Victor Duval, an art dealer who disappeared years ago. My father believed Duval had hidden something inside the painting, something that could destroy the entire art network." Jessica's mind raced. So Dr. Hawthorne was trying to uncover a hidden treasure? Or a secret? "Yes," Edith whispered. "But I think he was getting too close. Lucian was angry with him. They argued just a few days before everything happened. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Dr. Hawthorne had been digging into a criminal network disguised as an art world, one with roots that went deep, far deeper than Jessica had initially imagined. Lucian, the shadowy figure mentioned in the letters and journals, was tied to that network. And now, it seemed that someone had decided Dr. Hawthorne knew too much. But who had killed him? And was Lucian still involved? Jessica stood up and placed the journal back on the desk. "Edith, I think I need to talk to Lucian. Do you know where I can find him?" Edith bit her lip. "I don't know where he is now. But my father had mentioned him once in passing. He was working out of a gallery in London. It's a place called the Obsidian Vault. I'm not sure if it's still open, but that's where Lucian was last involved in any exhibitions." The Obsidian Vault. Jessica's mind clicked. It was a known front for underground art dealings, but no one had been able to prove it. Now, it seemed, she had a lead. Lucian was at the center of this tangled web of lies, and if she could find him, perhaps she could unravel the whole story. Jessica turned to Edith. "I'll need to leave for London immediately. Can you gather any information about Lucian's whereabouts? Anything that might help?" Edith nodded, her face determined. "I'll do my best." As Jessica stepped out into the hallway, her mind was focused on the task ahead. The pieces were falling into place, but there were still so many questions. Who had murdered Dr. Hawthorne? Was Lucian the mastermind behind the crime, or was he simply a pawn in a much larger game? And what was hidden inside the painting that had cost so many lives? She couldn't answer those questions yet, but she knew one thing for sure: the truth was waiting for her in London, and she would stop at nothing to uncover it. Chapter 4: The Hidden Secret. London was bustling as ever, a city of contrasts and chaos, where art and crime often lived side by side. Jessica made her way through the crowded streets, her thoughts still lingering on the unsettling clues she had uncovered in Hawthorne House. The journey from St. Mary Mead to London had given her plenty of time to reflect, and she was certain now that Dr. Hawthorne's research into the portrait was not merely a hobby, it was the key to a much darker mystery. The Obsidian Vault, a gallery that Jessica had heard whispers about over the years, was located in the heart of London's art district, tucked between a series of sleek modern art museums and historical buildings that looked like they had been frozen in time. The gallery's exterior was stark, black stone with no windows and a heavy iron door, making it seem more like a fortress than a place to view art. It was precisely the kind of place that someone with sinister intentions would use to hide in plain sight. Jessica approached the door, her heart racing. She had no idea what to expect inside, but one thing was certain: Lucian, the mysterious figure who had been at the heart of Dr. Hawthorne's research, was involved with the gallery, and she had to find him before it was too late. The door creaked open as Jessica pushed it, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent street. She stepped inside and was greeted by the sharp scent of polished wood and old books. The gallery was dimly lit, with only a few lights casting soft pools of brightness on the walls. The paintings that adorned the space were strange, even unsettling, much like the one that had hung in Dr. Hawthorne's gallery. They were bold, dark, and full of shadowy figures, many of which seemed to be hiding something just beneath the surface. At the back of the gallery, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and sharp features stood behind a counter. His eyes narrowed slightly when he saw Jessica enter. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked in a low, gravelly voice. "I'm looking for someone," Jessica replied, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Lucian. Is he here?" The man's eyes flickered with recognition, but only for a moment. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Lucian is not one for visitors, and he doesn't take kindly to people asking about him." Jessica stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm investigating a murder. Dr. Gregory Hawthorne is dead, and I believe Lucian had something to do with it. I need to speak with him." The man's expression shifted. It was fleeting, but Jessica noticed it, a subtle flicker of fear. He glanced toward a door at the back of the room, then back at Jessica. "You're serious, aren't you?" "I am." The man sighed, as if resigning himself to an inevitable outcome. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." He led Jessica through a narrow corridor at the back of the gallery and into a small, dimly lit office. There, behind a cluttered desk covered in art books, sat a man who could only be Lucian. His face was gaunt, his eyes calculating, and his expression was one of a man who had seen far too much. The room smelled faintly of cigars and paint, and the walls were lined with paintings, most of them abstract and violent in tone. Lucian didn't rise from his seat when Jessica entered. Instead, he regarded her with a cold, almost bored expression. "I hear you're looking for me," he said, his voice smooth but tinged with suspicion. "And I hear you've been asking about me in places where people like me don't want to be found." "I'm not here for games," Jessica replied, her voice firm. "I need answers. Dr. Hawthorne is dead, and I believe you know why." Lucian's lips curled into a slight, mocking smile. "Dr. Hawthorne, I wondered how long it would take for someone like you to show up. You've been poking around, haven't you? Asking questions, making connections that no one else would dare make." Jessica leaned forward. "Dr. Hawthorne was murdered because he uncovered something he shouldn't have. Something you didn't want anyone to know about." Lucian's smile faded. He looked at Jessica with an intensity that almost sent a chill through her. "You're quite clever, but it's too late now. You should have stayed away." Jessica narrowed her eyes. "I'm not here to threaten you, Lucian. I just want to know the truth. About the painting. About what it means." Lucian let out a small, hollow laugh. "You think the painting is the key? You think you'll find answers in a canvas? You're looking at the wrong thing, Miss Fletcher. The answers you seek aren't hidden in shadows. They're buried much deeper than that." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" Lucian stood slowly, his long fingers grazing the edge of the desk as he moved toward a large canvas in the corner of the room. It was a portrait, similar to the one Jessica had seen at Hawthorne House, but this one was different. It was far darker, more ominous. The figure in the painting was the same woman, but her eyes were filled with torment and desperation. "This painting," Lucian said, his voice low and menacing, "is more than just art. It's a record of everything that's gone wrong, everything that's been hidden from the world. Dr. Hawthorne was getting too close to it. He was trying to expose what we've all worked so hard to protect." Jessica stepped forward, her pulse quickening. "What is it, Lucian? What's the secret?" Lucian didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and touched the edge of the frame, running his fingers over the woman's painted face. "The woman in the painting," he said quietly, "was the key. She knew too much. She was part of a network that dealt in stolen art, forgeries, and hidden treasures. But she became a liability. She disappeared years ago. We've been covering her tracks ever since." Jessica's mind was racing. The woman in the portrait was no ordinary subject. She was part of something much larger, something dangerous. And Dr. Hawthorne, in his relentless pursuit of the truth, had uncovered the network's darkest secret. Lucian turned to face her, his eyes cold. "Dr. Hawthorne didn't die for nothing, you know. But you won't find the answers here. The painting is just the beginning. If you want to know more, you'll have to dig deeper. And that's something most people would be too afraid to do." Jessica took a step back, her resolve hardening. "I'm not afraid." Lucian's lips twisted into a sinister grin. "Then you'll learn the hard way." Chapter 5. The Chilling Revelation. The room in the obsidian vault seemed to grow colder with every word Lucian spoke. The tension was palpable, and Jessica could feel the weight of the truth pressing against her. Lucian was not the nervous, guilty figure she had expected. Instead, he exuded a quiet menace, his calm demeanor only deepening the sense of danger that swirled around him. He had revealed a dangerous secret about Dr. Hawthorne's death, but Jessica knew he was still hiding something. Something more sinister. The woman in the painting, the one whose eyes seemed to follow her every movement, had been part of an underground art network, a network connected to theft, forgeries, and hidden treasures. Dr. Hawthorne had uncovered it, and that had cost him his life. But Jessica wasn't done yet. She couldn't let Lucian off the hook with a half-truth. "You're telling me that Dr. Hawthorne stumbled upon a hidden criminal enterprise, and that led to his death?" Jessica asked, her voice steady but sharp. "But you're not explaining everything. You're holding back." Lucian's eyes darkened, and he stepped closer to her, the intensity in his gaze growing. "You think you understand, don't you? That this is just about stolen art and hidden paintings? It's so much more than that. This network, it's not just art theft. It's about control, power, and influence over the world's most valuable pieces of history. Dr. Hawthorne was a threat to that control, and he didn't even know the full extent of it." Jessica remained silent, processing his words. The web of lies, deceit, and criminality stretched further than she had imagined. Lucian wasn't just part of an art forgery ring. He was part of something that manipulated history itself, hiding or controlling works of art that held cultural and financial significance. These pieces weren't just about money, they were symbols of power, capable of swaying nations, influencing governments, and controlling the flow of history. "Who else is involved in this network?" Jessica pressed, refusing to back down. Lucian smirked. "You really think I'm going to spill all my secrets to you, Jessica? You're a clever woman, but you're in way over your head." "Maybe," Jessica said, her voice firm. "But I'll still find the truth. The painting, the woman, your connection to it. It's all connected. And I will find the answers, Lucian." Lucian's expression faltered for a moment, a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, passing through his eyes. It was subtle, but Jessica caught it. She took a step closer to him, her eyes narrowing. Dr. Hawthorne's obsession with this woman in the portrait, he wasn't just fascinated by her. He believed she held the key to something that could bring down this entire network. Jessica continued, her voice now lower, almost conspiratorial. "And you're trying to cover it up. But the more I learn, the clearer it becomes. You're scared, Lucian. Scared of the truth coming out." For the first time since Jessica had entered the gallery, Lucian seemed rattled. He clenched his fists at his sides, his jaw tightening. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he hissed. "I've been in this game long enough to know that people like you, people who dig too deep, don't last long. The truth you're looking for, it will bury you." Jessica stood her ground, meeting his intense gaze. "You're wrong. The truth will set me free. But it's clear that you don't want anyone else to see it." Lucian stepped back, his face now twisted in anger. "You think you're the first one to try and stop me? You think you'll be the one to unravel everything? You're nothing more than an obstacle." and obstacles, Jessica, are meant to be removed. Before she could react, he turned and stalked toward a set of heavy curtains at the back of the room. He pulled them aside, revealing a hidden doorway. If you want to learn the truth, then go. But know this, it will cost you. Your life, your career, maybe even your soul. Jessica didn't hesitate. She followed him through the door, stepping into a darkened hallway that led deeper into the gallery. The air felt thick with history, thick with lies and secrets. She could hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing ahead, Lucien's presence just out of sight, like a shadow guiding her into the unknown. "Where are we going?" Jessica called out, her voice cutting through the silence. Lucien's voice floated back to her, distant and cold. "You want the truth? You'll find it in the vault." He disappeared into the shadows, and Jessica followed. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the walls lined with strange, abstract artworks that seemed to distort as she walked past them. Her mind was racing with the possibilities. The vault? Was it a hidden room? A secret storage area where Lucien kept the stolen paintings? Or was it something more? Something tied to the history of the woman in the portrait? Finally, they reached the end of the hallway. Lucien had already reached a large iron door, which he opened with a key. As he swung it open, a musty, stale air wafted from within, a stark contrast to the fresh scent of the rest of the gallery. Inside, Jessica was met with a sight that left her momentarily breathless. The room was vast, stretching far beyond what she had expected. It was lined with rows of paintings, but these weren't on display for the public. These were hidden away, their frames covered in dust and cobwebs. Some of the pieces were partially obscured, their edges worn with age. These weren't just art, they were relics, some of them lost to history, some of them stolen from the world's most prestigious collections. But it wasn't the paintings that caught Jessica's attention. It was the large, ornate chest sitting in the center of the room. It was covered in intricate carvings, the wood aged and cracked from years of neglect. And it was locked. Lucien stood beside the chest, a twisted smile on his face. "This," he said, his voice low, "is the heart of it all. The truth you're looking for is inside this chest. But once you open it, there's no going back. Are you ready to face the consequences?" Jessica stood frozen, her mind swirling with the weight of what she had uncovered. She had come so far, but now she was standing on the precipice of something much larger than she had ever imagined. The truth was within her reach, but Lucien's warning echoed in her mind. What would opening the chest reveal? And would the truth destroy her as he claimed? With a deep breath, Jessica stepped forward, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the chest. She had no choice now. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. The trap is set. The air in the vault was thick with tension, heavy with the weight of secrets buried within its walls. Jessica stood in front of the large, ornate chest, her hand hovering over the cold, metal lock. Lucien, standing beside her, watched her intently, his eyes glimmering with a mix of amusement and something far darker. "This is it," Lucien said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The moment of truth. But remember, Jessica, once you open this, everything changes. You'll know things you can't unknow. You'll see the world for what it really is, a place built on lies, manipulation, and power. Can you live with that?" Jessica didn't hesitate. She could feel her heart racing, her breath steady. She had already come too far to turn back now. Lucien's warning only fueled her determination. She needed to know the truth, no matter the consequences. With a swift motion, she took the key from Lucien's outstretched hand and slid it into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the chest creaked open, its heavy lid lifting slowly, as if reluctant to reveal its contents. Inside, the chest was filled with what looked like old papers, documents, letters, and photographs, yellowed with age. But amidst the pile of papers, there was something far more striking. A small, intricately carved box lay at the bottom, its surface covered in dust, its shape oddly familiar. The box was small enough to fit in the palm of her hand, and it radiated an aura of significance, as if it held the answers to everything. Jessica picked up the box, her fingers trembling slightly. The carvings on its surface matched the design on the woman's portrait, the same swirls, the same motifs. She knew instinctively that this was the key, the object that had eluded Dr. Hawthorne in his research. Lucien stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he watched Jessica carefully. "That," he said, his voice tinged with something darker, "is the heart of the secret. The woman in the painting, the network we've built. She was more than just a piece of history. She was the beginning of it all. And this box contains everything you need to know." Jessica opened the box cautiously, revealing a small, folded parchment inside. The paper was fragile, its edges curling slightly, but the writing on it was still legible. The text was in an old, archaic script, one that Jessica recognized from her own research on historical codes and forgeries. She couldn't read it all at once, but one word jumped out at her: treasure. "Treasure?" Jessica murmured, her brow furrowing. "What treasure?" Lucien stepped back, a knowing smile crossing his face. "Ah, you're starting to understand now, aren't you? The treasure was never meant to be found by anyone, least of all by Dr. Hawthorne. You see, this network, this web of art, theft, and forgery, it was all about controlling history. But there was a treasure hidden within it, hidden in plain sight. A treasure that could change everything." Jessica's mind was racing as she read the rest of the note. It detailed a map leading to a hidden collection of art that had been stolen over the years. But it was more than just paintings and sculptures. The treasure mentioned in the note wasn't just valuable, it was powerful. The artworks were connected to significant moments in history, moments that had been carefully manipulated over centuries to shape the world as it was today. The more Jessica read, the clearer it became. This treasure wasn't about wealth. It was about control. The paintings, the forgeries, the entire network had been built to shape the course of history, to ensure that certain people remained in power. The woman in the portrait, the one Dr. Hawthorne had been so obsessed with, was more than just a victim. She was part of a larger scheme, one that had been playing out in the shadows for centuries. Jessica's fingers trembled as she folded the letter back into the box. Lucien had been right. She had uncovered something far more dangerous than just art forgeries. This was a conspiracy that stretched across time, and it had claimed the life of Dr. Hawthorne. Lucien watched her carefully, a cold smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Now you see the bigger picture. But it's too late for you, Jessica. Once you've seen this, you're part of it. You can't just walk away from what you've discovered. The network will come after you, just like they came after Dr. Hawthorne. Jessica's heart pounded in her chest. She had known this wouldn't be easy, but the realization that she was now a target sent a wave of cold dread through her. She had uncovered the truth, but the price of that truth was far higher than she had anticipated. Lucian had led her here, and now she could feel the walls closing in. She had become part of a much larger game, one where the stakes were more than just her life. Do you think you can stop it? Lucian's voice was dripping with mockery. You can't. This is bigger than you, bigger than Dr. Hawthorne. This has been going on for centuries, and no one can touch it. Jessica stood up, her resolve hardening. You're wrong. I've stopped worse. And I'm not backing down now. Lucian laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a laugh of someone who knew something Jessica didn't, someone who had already planned for this moment. You think this is the end, Jessica? Lucian asked, his eyes gleaming with malice. This is just the beginning. You've uncovered the secret, but now you've become part of the web. There's nowhere to hide. Before Jessica could respond, the door to the vault slammed shut behind her with a deafening crash. The sound echoed through the room, sending a jolt of panic through her. Lucian's grin widened, and he slowly backed away toward the far corner of the vault. Welcome to the game, he said softly. You've made your choice. And now, you'll see just how deep it really goes. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The heavy door to the vault slammed shut with a finality that echoed through Jessica's mind. The sound reverberated against the cold stone walls, leaving her in a suffocating silence. For a moment, Jessica simply stood there, her heart pounding as the weight of her situation pressed in on her from all sides. The chest, the note, Lucian's cryptic warning, they were all part of a much larger puzzle. But now she had no way out, no way to retreat. Lucian's laughter still lingered in the air as he backed away toward the corner of the room, his eyes gleaming with malice. You really thought you could uncover the truth and walk away unscathed? He taunted. You've just stepped into a much bigger world, Jessica. One you can't escape from. Jessica's pulse quickened, but she refused to show fear. Her mind was already racing through the details of the case, the strange portrait, the hidden network, the treasure that had been buried for centuries. She had uncovered the truth, but now the consequences were real. Lucian was right about one thing. This was no longer just a murder investigation. She had stumbled into something far more dangerous, and if she wasn't careful, she could easily become its next victim. But Jessica had faced danger before. She had solved mysteries that seemed impossible, and she wasn't about to let Lucian's threats deter her now. Your game is over, Lucian, Jessica said, her voice steady. You can lock me in here all you want, but I will find a way out. And when I do, I'll make sure the truth gets out with me. Lucian's smirk deepened, and he folded his arms across his chest. You think you're the first person to try and stop us? You think you'll be the one to expose everything? You won't make it out of here alive, Jessica. We'll make sure of that. Jessica's eyes narrowed as she studied him. She had no intention of backing down, but she needed a plan. She couldn't let herself get trapped in this web of lies and deceit. She needed to think, to outsmart Lucian, and anyone else involved in this dangerous game. Just then, the faint sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the vault. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone in the gallery. Someone was coming. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was Lucien expecting someone? Had the network already set a trap for her? Lucien's eyes flickered toward the door, his expression changing to one of calculated calm. "You've got company," he said softly, his lips curling into a knowing smile. "I hope you're ready to face the consequences of your curiosity." Jessica tensed, her instincts kicking into overdrive. She had no idea who was on the other side of that door, but she knew one thing. She had to get out, and fast. As Lucien turned his back to her, distracted by the approaching footsteps, Jessica saw her opportunity. She made a quick move, darting toward a nearby shelf filled with old, dusty art books. Grabbing the heaviest volume she could find, she hurled it toward the door with all her strength. The sound of the book crashing against the wood was enough to momentarily distract Lucien, and Jessica seized the moment. She sprinted toward the back of the vault, her eyes scanning the room for an escape route. The door to the vault swung open, revealing a tall, imposing figure standing in the doorway. It was a man in a dark suit, his face hidden by the shadow cast from the hallway light. Jessica's heart raced as the figure stepped inside, his cold eyes locking onto hers. Lucien turned to face the man, his smile faltering. "I didn't expect you so soon," he said, his tone laced with unease. "That's the problem with your kind," the man replied, his voice smooth and calculated. "You think you control everything. But the truth is, you're just a pawn in a much larger game." Jessica froze, her mind racing. The man in the doorway wasn't just anyone. He was part of the network, a key player in the game that had claimed Dr. Hawthorne's life. But what was his role? And why had he arrived just in time to stop her? "Lucien," the man continued, his eyes never leaving Jessica, "you've made a mess of things. You were supposed to handle this quietly, but now you've involved the wrong people. You know what happens to people who get too curious, don't you?" Jessica watched in silence as the man's words sank in. This was bigger than she had imagined. The network wasn't just an underground ring of art forgers and thieves. It was a powerful group with connections that reached into the highest echelons of society. And Lucien, for all his bravado, was just a cog in the wheel. Lucien stiffened, clearly uncomfortable with the man's authority. "I didn't plan for this." "But he gestured toward Jessica. "She's been digging into things she shouldn't have. She knows too much." The man's gaze flickered toward Jessica, and for a moment, their eyes locked. She could see the cold calculation in his eyes, the ruthless determination that had driven this network for years. But something else was there too, fear, barely concealed beneath the surface. The man wasn't just confident. He was desperate. And that gave Jessica hope. "You've both made a grave mistake," the man said, stepping fully into the room. "Jessica Fletcher, I presume. You've uncovered far more than you should have. But the truth is, it's too late for you. This is bigger than you, bigger than any of us. And you're going to pay the price for your curiosity." Jessica's mind raced. She had no intention of letting him or Lucien control the outcome. She had already come too far, and she wasn't about to let these men walk away unscathed. "Not today," Jessica muttered under her breath, her eyes darting toward the shelves and then to the door. The man might think he had her trapped, but Jessica had faced far worse, and she wasn't about to let this be her end. In the next moment, Jessica made her move. She rushed toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going down without a fight. Chapter 8. The Legacy Rewritten. The moment Jessica made her move, everything seemed to shift into chaos. Her footsteps echoed loudly against the cold stone floors as she rushed toward the door, her mind racing for an escape plan. The man in the doorway, his eyes cold and calculating, stepped forward with a swiftness that belied his size. Lucien, momentarily distracted by her sudden movement, barely managed to react in time. "You won't get away," the man called after her, his voice eerily calm. "Not this time." Jessica's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she rounded the corner of the vault. The corridor ahead was dimly lit, but Jessica's eyes were sharp, and her instincts were sharper. She had no intention of being cornered again. She needed to get out, and fast. The truth she had uncovered was far too dangerous, and she knew these men wouldn't stop until they silenced her permanently. The sound of footsteps grew louder behind her as the man and Lucien chased after her. But Jessica was quick. She had been in tighter situations before, and she knew how to think on her feet. Her eyes scanned the hallway ahead, searching for any way to escape. The faintest light at the end of the corridor caught her attention, the emergency exit. She darted toward it, ignoring the calls from behind her. She didn't look back. There was no time. Every step she took brought her closer to freedom. The door at the end of the corridor was old, rusted, and clearly not used often, but Jessica didn't care. She slammed into it with all her strength, forcing it open just wide enough for her to slip through. The cool night air hit her face like a slap, but she didn't slow down. She ran, not daring to stop or look back. She had to keep moving. But as she sprinted down the alleyway, her mind was still racing. What had she uncovered? The treasure, the network, the legacy of hidden art that could rewrite history itself. All of it had led to this moment. The woman in the portrait, the key to the mystery, had been a pawn in a much larger game, a game of power and control that had spanned centuries. Dr. Hawthorne had been murdered for trying to expose it. And now, Jessica had become entangled in it all. She couldn't let it end here. She couldn't let Lucien or anyone else bury the truth. As Jessica reached the end of the alley, she spotted a figure in the distance. Her pulse quickened, and for a moment, she feared it was one of Lucien's men closing in on her. But when the figure stepped closer, she recognized him immediately. It was Detective Inspector Wallace. "Miss Fletcher," Wallace called out, his voice carrying through the night. "Are you all right?" Jessica paused, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. "I'm fine, but I need your help. The truth, it's bigger than I thought. I've uncovered something dangerous." Wallace frowned, clearly confused. "What's going on, Jessica? We've been looking for you. The gallery, the vault, it's a crime scene now. You can't just run off like this. What have you found?" Jessica's eyes locked with his, and she knew there was no turning back now. She had to trust him. She had no other choice. "I found the key to everything," she said urgently. "The painting, the treasure, It's all part of a larger network. A network that's been hiding stolen art and controlling history itself. Dr. Hawthorne was murdered because he got too close to uncovering it. And now they'll come after me too. But I can't let them win. We have to stop them before they bury the truth for good. Wallace looked stunned for a moment, but then he nodded, his expression hardening. We need to move quickly. If what you're saying is true, then this is far bigger than we anticipated. I'll make sure we get this information to the right people. But we need to act fast. Jessica nodded, relief flooding her veins for the first time since she'd entered the obsidian vault. She had found an ally in Wallace, someone who believed in her and was willing to help bring the truth to light. Do you have everything? Wallace asked, his voice low but urgent. Jessica reached into her bag and pulled out the small box with the cryptic note inside. She handed it to Wallace, who took it carefully. This is what they were trying to hide, Jessica said. This box contains the key to the network's legacy. And the woman in the portrait, it's all connected. Wallace nodded as he examined the box. I'll have this analyzed immediately. But we need to get you somewhere safe first. Before Jessica could respond, the sound of a car engine rumbled in the distance, growing louder. She turned, her senses heightened. It was a black SUV, barreling toward them down the alleyway. We need to move, Wallace said quickly, grabbing Jessica's arm and pulling her toward the nearby street. Now. They sprinted down the alley, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they rounded a corner and ducked into another side street. Jessica's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to keep up with Wallace's fast pace. The car was getting closer. The engine roared, a sound that sent a chill through Jessica's bones. They had to lose them, or they would be trapped. Wallace glanced over at Jessica, his eyes hard with determination. I'm taking you to a safe house. It's the only way we can protect you and make sure this information gets to the right people. They turned another corner, and Jessica's eyes scanned the streets for any sign of escape. She couldn't afford to let herself be captured. Not now. Not when she was so close to exposing the truth. The black SUV skidded around the corner just as Jessica and Wallace reached the end of the street. A flash of movement caught her eye, a figure in the shadows, waiting. Get down, Wallace shouted, shoving Jessica behind a dumpster. The SUV screeched to a halt just as gunshots rang out. Jessica ducked, her breath catching in her throat as the bullets ricocheted off the concrete. She could feel the heat of the shots pass by her, but she didn't dare look up. Stay down, Wallace shouted, pulling her closer to the dumpster. We're not done yet, Jessica. But we will be. We'll bring them down. Together. Jessica nodded, her mind focused on one thing, survival. She had uncovered the legacy, the truth behind Dr. Hawthorne's murder, and she wasn't going to let it end here. Not now, not ever. The game was far from over, but for the first time, Jessica could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And she was going to make sure that the truth was revealed, no matter what it took.